Welcome back to Brighter Morning with Bo. This is MCTV and new 97.5 FM Hot Like Pepper Radio, multicultural TV as well. And we want to talk now with Mr. Gregory Aboud, the president of DOMA, the Downtown Merchants Association, and we're going to have a conversation with him. How are you going, Mr. Aboud? How are you?
Good, thank you very much. Good morning to you and to the listening public and so on.
Well, thanks for agreeing to come on the program. Well, we have a budget coming up, and I'm sure you sent proposals to the Minister of Finance. Would you like to enlighten the public about what some of those proposals might have been?
Well, I mean, our desires and hopes for the budget really reside in efficiency and in the type of interface that takes place between us and the major state agencies that impact upon our efficiencies. It hasn't been, it has not been a great change in what the business community is asking for or the guidance that we give. The general feeling is among a cross-section of business people, and I think it was said recently on more than one occasion that, when it comes to contributions from the business community, the Ministry of Finance doesn't really listen as much as we would want it to, and doesn't really include a lot of our requests on some of the major issues, because in fact, as a previous minister had indicated once, a budget is almost a quasi-political statement, and not only a political statement, but a political strategy. How to get more from some quarters, how to give more to other quarters, and how to basically create some popularity for the government of the day about having taken it easy on the citizens and so on. That's going to be an interesting exercise this time, because a lot of the parameters are changing, and we wait to see what measure of strategy and of thinking will come out of this budget. Obviously, we have grave concerns about the way the climate has changed. We live in a country, unlike many other Caribbean islands, that has been able to paint everything over with money. I'm not saying this as a comment on the current administration. It has been the case from the first time that we were told that money was no problem, which set the country on a path of basically thinking that the government could pay for and spend us out of any problem that we have. And we are currently involved in major projects involving huge sums of money, including the construction of a new airport in Tobago, which has raised so many questions, the potential plan to build a port in Tuco, which has caused so many questions based upon the allocation of resources. A number of purchases taking place without much of a tendering process, and so on. And I am commenting about this not because I think that this is a particular, issue for this particular administration. This problem is becoming worse and worse with each year that passes since independence, as the people basically accept and tolerate more and more. And all of these are matters of concern. It is not a secret that, oil and gas energy is not as popular product in the world market at the moment, and that plans are being made to lessen the dependence on oil and to find alternative energy sources. It is not a secret. And it's not a secret that we don't have a lot of gas, even though the gas price is pretty high at the moment, that we don't really have a lot of gas. And maybe some of our negotiations in the past may be called into question with respect to, how much revenue gas can provide us with at the moment. So, I don't want to, respond to the question about the budget by talking in specific terms about the price of gasoline and the property tax
No,
and
I
the
agree.
atmosphere and all that. We have general issues. We have general
Yeah,
issues,
but
and the efficiency with which we operate, how to move cargo, how to transport it, how to get permission from the public health department to open a new restaurant. I mean, all of this is a quagmire for the business community,
yes, it's really
to
hard.
get permission to operate, to get approvals, every interface to get a license, to transfer a vehicle.
It's
I mean, and it has spawned a whole new society. There's a whole new society of motor cars on your road, which have been sold multiple times and have never been transferred. Do you know that, Dr. Tiwari?
yes, I'm aware of
Are
that.
you aware of that?
I'm
Are you
aware.
aware that there are vehicles on the road now, tens of thousands of vehicles that have been sold multiple times, and that those sales and transactions have never come to the Ministry of Works and Transport or the licensing office? Never.
Yeah,
This
I
is a
know.
society that we're building because of inefficiencies. Nobody wants to go through that process of
You know,
passing through there and
we,
waiting and
we
being
have
given.
a lot of problems, and you're right. There are many impediments to the investment process. A person takes his money, he wants to take a risk, they want to put it down, try to do something rather than go to work. They want to really build something, and they make it so hard. I want to ask you something though, which is that, I mean, this COVID pandemic has affected the entire world. It's affected us, etc. I mean, don't you think, I mean, do you think that we can come in for the 2022 budget with the same kind of approach that we did, let's say, over the last 5 years, which has gotten us nowhere because we had systematic and significant declines every year for 5 years up to COVID? COVID has knocked us down. We had an 8.7% decline in the year 2020. That is no small decline. It's perhaps one of the largest declines we've ever had in the country. So in this kind of situation, do you think we can come back with a budget as we have budgeted in the past, or do we need to rethink, recalibrate, reinvent the approach to a budget in this country? Because we can't go on so.
Well, I don't want to pass judgment on, any of the budgets that precede this budget, because, the problem is that this sort of mode of communication between you and I also becomes a mode of communication between us and the politicians. And once again, this is not peculiar to this administration. And the reason for that, Dr. Tiwari, is the politicians don't really care what we say in private that much. Because what we say in private is between them and us, and they say, what a joke. These guys couldn't win a seat in the election. These guys don't have a clue what we're facing, and they're coming to ask us to do things which is going to make us unpopular and so on and this and that. They don't care what we say in private, more or less. They care what we say in public. So all of these words that I am giving you are intended to communicate the concerns we have about the country while not wanting to alienate the politicians who don't listen to us in private and who are only interested in what we say here publicly. Because how we impact the image of the politician by the complaints that are sometimes made or the criticisms that exist of policies which are being implemented creates a total disconnect and makes the listening behind closed doors when we meet privately even much worse. So every businessman, knowing the size of the government and the economy, knowing of the importance, is going to say that he's not commenting on the performance of the government, which is fair to say that, because this government is not guilty of any greater sin in terms of economic management and strategy than a previous government. And some will argue that we should be happy if they are guilty of less sin, as opposed to being guilty of no sin. We should just be grateful that they didn't do as much bad as a previous government, as the strategy for our personal assessment of how the country is being run. Having said all of that, I'm not wanting to comment on the management of the economy for the last 5 years and focusing on your question now,
No.
which is, can you read the same budget given the COVID environment? I don't think so. With great respect, my suggestion is I don't think any manager, which is what the Minister of Finance is, any manager could read the same budget this time that he read before. We know from experience, we know from what is taking place in the market that the tax uptake of the government is very low at the moment because of this. The rate of the turnover in the economy has diminished tremendously. I mean, if you shut down all the businesses that pay tax, I mean, you're not going to get tax from them because they haven't earned an income on which to be taxed. So the government's revenue has been diminished tremendously by the repeated shutdowns and the decline in overall turnover and so on. And that has been catastrophic for their revenue. What are they thinking? I probably imagine that he's thinking he's going to look for tax from another revenue, which is going to be his property tax. And the general question is, well, every country has a property tax. Trinidad might have a property tax. Well, we don't have a problem with that comment, except that you should operate the way that property tax operates in all those countries to which you refer, which is this. The money that you extract from homeowners and property owners in the form of a tax must not be used to build a highway to Toko or to buy planes and boats. That money must be used under the vernacular of a property tax, which is a well-known concept in many societies. That money must be used only for the property. So if you are going to go into a neighborhood and tax everybody in the neighborhood, you have to give them more than they get for the tax that they now give you. And in that regard, if you are going to tax a community, you have to assure them that from that tax, they can expect quicker response from an ambulance, more police protection in their neighborhood, less chances of flooding, greater repair of roads to and from their neighborhood, and so on. That is what a property tax is. A property tax is not a means of squeezing more juice out of an orange and using that juice to go and make a drink to be consumed anywhere outside of the neighborhood or the town from which you extracted the tax. So what is the government doing with this property tax is of grave concern to us with respect to how they intend to spend the money that they raise from taxing people for their property. A lot of people are arguing that this is the wrong time to bring a tax because of the fact that it is coming on the heels of a very dismal turnover performance for the economy, and you're asking people now to contemplate paying out more from their limited income and paying out more based on income that may not exist in the same volume that it previously exists. It's a risky political venture, in my opinion. Personally, if I was the one doing the job, and I don't know all the numbers that he sees, that the minister is seeing. I know his VAT receipts and his income tax receipts must be, in the pits, given what has been taking place. I'm not sure what he's thinking, but I would suggest that, tax is probably one of the most unpopular strategies that any government. I mean, there are a catalogue of elections which have been lost on the basis of taxes being imposed. There's an election in Canada today in which the spending of the government is a major issue, and in which the incumbent there is facing questions that he hasn't been able to answer. We are in Trinidad and Tobago being told about hundreds of millions of dollars that were possibly lost unnecessarily at the National Gas Company. We don't know all the details of who made the decision and whose choice it was to make the investment, but the long and short of it is that nobody has denied that $400 or $500 million has been lost. You are asking the people to pay more tax on their most prized possession, which is their home. You are asking them to pay more tax at the very same time that you are admitting to them that you lost $400 or $500 million. It's a risky proposition from my point of view. I really want to know that the people can expect to get more service at the properties from which they are paying this new tax, so that you can guarantee them that there will be less mosquitoes and fewer potholes and less flooding and more clean drains and more response and attention to their needs and requests. Don't even mention water. Are you coming to tax people who haven't had water in 6 months, for instance? All these issues arise with respect to the budget coming and to your question about whether he could read the same budget in a COVID year like this. I would think not, but we have to wait and see, because, time is on their side, and perhaps maybe the policies he's going to read now will provide results and improvements in the performance of the economy that will, make the government more popular, is maybe the risk they are going to take, make them more popular in 2 years' time when they come back to ask the country for more time to run, to be reelected. Maybe he can find a way to enact intelligent policies that will stimulate investment and get the country going, deliver performance to the people that are going to pay this property tax, to give them back. I don't know why I'm saying people who are going to pay it, myself included, to give us back performance in the properties where we live and in the businesses where we operate, that we will face less threats, greater certainties, less threats of crime. I remember your question to the minister earlier about the crime situation. It's a very perplexing situation.
Yes, it is.
And we're all very interested and on the edge of our seats, waiting on the Honorable Minister to come and tell us what his management plan is, because that is what a budget really is, or supposed to be. You're supposed to come and tell us what is your management plan about how you're going to raise the money that you need to run the country. And you really need to tell us, are you going to try and run the country again with the same amount of money that you ran it before, given your great shortfall in income? All of these are pressing questions, and I don't envy the minister's position. And we are hopeful and anxious, I should say.
Well, you use the word anxious, and I was just thinking as you were talking, Gregory, that you are sounding a little tired, a little anxious, and a little resigned to what you fear might be an inevitability about the road that we are going to travel in the next year. Am I wrong?
I would say that perhaps you may have detected, some maturity, maybe, in my perspective. Well, if I could say that, I mean,
listening to you.
well, let's be very honest. I think the citizens of the country, more or less, are pretty resigned to the fact that, we really are in for it all the time. What is the difference between the governments that we vote out of office and the governments that we vote into office? Some will argue that this government has not wasted as much money. Some will argue that the other government spent money and stimulated the economy. I could talk about that because I'm a citizen in the winter of my life, maybe I could say. And
You're a young man, Gregory.
The point is that I have to be realistic about what the road ahead might have on it. But let's be very honest. You ask me if I sound resigned or a little despondent. The people of this country say it often, and I'm talking about all strata. And particularly because I spend most of my time in Port-of-Spain, and I talked to the
Ordinary people, yes, of course. The sound, what's it? We have a problem with your sound, Gregory. Check your...